Hey guys, this is RobJamWeb here for Waxadis Music Tutorials, and welcome to episode 2 of this video stroke podcast episode where I focus on the music of my youth and my DJing career and whatnot. This year is episode 2, 1990. I'm going to go from 89 to 99 because they're the 10 years that are the most important to me regarding my music production and my DJing and my musical development as a producer and musician and whatnot, and my influences and tastes throughout those years. Now, this year is a little bit different to the 89 one I did. The 89 one was a lot more upbeat, and there was a lot more acid house stuff going on, and a lot more, bigger tracks, bigger sounding tracks, should I say. Whereas this year, it kind of went down a peg or two. Things slowed down a little bit. If you look at the music that was around, you had the Stone Roses and the Mondays still. That whole thing was going on, and that exploded that year more than ever. So you had that kind of dance hybrid indie rock thing. And then you had a lot of great hip-hop coming out as well during this period. You know, we had MC Hammer and Vanilla Ice who had huge hits, and even though by now, years later, those records are kind of become like novelty records, so to speak, through culture and through the internet and stuff. But back in the day, they were actually very, successful, huge records that really were, to the most hardcore hip-hop head, were credible records for a while. But yeah, then there was things like Chad Jackson, Hear the Drummer Get Wicked. There was all that kind of stuff, that kind of sample-based hip-hop which was coming out. Beats International, Norman Cook, Fatboy Slim doing his thing, and that was a slower thing again, sampling the Clash bass line and those sort of records. And then you had various other bits like Mantronics and CNC Music Factory, so there was a whole host of good records coming out. And then you had the bleep scene, which was the techno-y thing coming from north in the north of England with Sheffield, Warp Records, LFO, and all that kind of stuff. So there was that going off. So it was a bit of a mixture, really. And for me, that year, 1990, I was 14, and it was when we really started going to, like under 18s discos. And there was a nightclub brand in England called Britzy, and we used to go there every Friday. And a lot of this music was the first time we heard it there, so the DJ would play a lot of good stuff as well as the pop stuff. And so they were them sort of days doing that. So that was that. So but there's also a whole stack of records that I loved from that period where I still play today. There's a lot of records that still inspire me from that period. And I'm going to start off with the first one, which is a great Balearic anthem. It's a classic Balearic record, and it's called Snappiness by BBG. And it's a beautiful, chill-out little track, piano track. And it's just one of the finest, coolest, lush productions from that era. It's got enough tempo for it to be a bit housey, I suppose. But it's just a really dreamy track that really, floats my boat. It's just one of those records that's perfect for the summer. It's one of them nice vibes. It's something that I always come back to, and it came out eventually on a classic Balearic album by Mastercuts Records, and it's one of those records that just stuck with me ever since. All the other records have come and gone. This is one of them records from that era that's just great. Love it. there was other records at that period that came out that were like sample based. There was one called JT and the Big Family, Moments in Soul, which sampled Soul to Soul's classic, and the Art of Noise record, Moments in Love. So there's a lot of sample based stuff coming out at that time. But that was BBG and Snappiness, and I don't know who produced it. I can't quite see because the label on the record is pink and the colours are a bit faded. So that was that one. And then next up on the on my inspirational list is one record that's never gone away. Everybody knows it. It's the 12-inch version of... Let me just flip it on. Side we're on. Sure. And it's just one of those records that's just from my youth. It's just stuck with me ever since. And, you know, it's just the coolest record. And just reminds me of my youth. It's a 12-inch mix of Step On, the Happy Mondays. And that whole thing was going off during that period, you know, we were teenagers, and the whole Stone Roses, Charlatans, all those bands were going around and causing a fuss. And as quick as they came, they quickly left. But remained legends ever since, so they did something right. And I love this version because it's a lot more drawn out, it's a lot more, you know, dubby kind of vibe. Obviously it's produced by Paul Oakenfold as well, and I think it's Steve Osborne, was it? And then the B-side is just the original version with the piano, and then it goes into a little bit of an extended bit here. No, that is the 7-inch version, which is on the flip. But yeah, that's just one of them records, another factory record production that has always stuck with me ever since I heard it. It's probably a youth thing, I don't know. But it was one of them records nevertheless. Next up is probably one of the coolest dance bands ever to come out of music, and that is the KLF and 3am Eternal. The Children of the Revolution, the Guns of Moo Moo. Now this record this is such a huge contrast to what they were doing elsewhere. Basically the KLF at this time were producing an album called Chill Out, and it was just one of the most amazingly put together albums in electronic music history. It was all samples, and it was like a concept album where they're on a road trip, and it was proper ambient, proper dreamy, proper chill out, really bizarre stuff, where you've got like the Elvis Presley samples in there mixed in with really, you know, strange ambient sounds and space noises and sound effects and stuff. But anyway, on the opposite side of that, at the same time, they produced a hit record called 3am Eternal, and it was just one of the greatest dance kind of... It's a little bit like... wrong side. This is the main one. It's a kind of a like dance rap sort of thing, you know, that kind of hip housey sort of track. But I used to love this record when I was 14, and it was just brilliant. And I loved the video. They were driving around London, it's, you know, in the middle of the night.
KLF is gonna rock you.
Also other records at that time that were like this, they're like that hip house thing. You had MC Tunes and 808 State doing The Only Round That Bites, and there's quite a few of the tracks around that time, as I say, that kind of up tempo sort of hip hop stuff. But the KLF just did something a little bit different to all those. They kind of brought that techno vibe to it, which was you know, a lot more creative in my opinion. So that was the KLF and 3AM Eternal, just one of them records again from youth, which has always stuck with me. And the next up is probably one of my favourite kind of dance hip-hop rap tracks again, and that is Nomad and I Want to Give You Devotion with MC Mikey Freedom. Now, I spoke about this briefly in the last episode where they sampled the vocal from 10 City Devotion. And had they not sampled that a cappella from that record, this record probably would not have been made. I could be wrong, but highly unlikely. So this record, for me, there's the intro, the pads, the crowd sample, just these lush pads that come up. It's just always been a firm favourite of mine. Something that I've always loved. It's absolutely battered, my copy. As you can see, I've sellotaped up the edges of the sleeve. It's that worn out, crackling and all sorts. But yeah, Nomad just reminds me of that summer, I suppose.
I wanna give you devotion.
And this is where the vocal bit comes from the 10 City record. It's just a tiny snippet. It's the only bit they've taken, and they could have made the record without that sample. But and here it comes here. And again, it was just one of those records that, you know, brought all the influences together. It brought hip-hop, and it was techno, and it was house, you know, all the little things, soul, everything's in there. And it was a really creative time for that kind of breakbeaty sort of, you know, hybrid of dance music, I suppose, where everything came together in one track. Yeah, so that's just one of my firm favourites. And on the flip side is an instrumental, but at the end they've got like a track called Sang Freud, and this is just basically the track without the rap, I suppose. And it's just like a bit more ambient, just a little bit more chilled out. So that was that. That was Nomad and I Want to Give You Devotion on Rumour Records in the summer of 1990. Next up, we're going to go a little bit housey now, I suppose, with one of the tracks. Now, this originally came out in '89 as an instrumental, more or less as an instrumental. And then by 1990, they did a vocal remix with Sharon D. Clarke. And this is one of them records that instantly grabs you with that piano riff. And it is FPI Project, Rich in Paradise, the vocal remix. Again, on Rumour Records, another label that did really well in those days of early house and techno and rave stuff. And this is where they take the actual track and do the full vocal on it and stick a guitar in it, whereas the instrumental, the original instrumental, is a lot more I prefer that a lot more, but there's something about the vocal mix that just gets the party going, I suppose, and it's always been a firm favourite. It just wins people over instantly, I suppose. And FPI Project just did so many cool records between '89 up until the early to mid '90s. Some great stuff coming out of Italy from that period. Here it comes.
You
was FPI Project and Sharon D. Clark, and the other tracks on there was the instrumental original version, which is a lot more chilled out from the year before, just more bassliney. And the flip side again is just another remix and a quieter version called the Boom Boom Mix, which was even more chilled out, I think. It's a little bit more guitar-y. It's not my cup of tea, that one. But still, the original version and the piano remix with the vocal is one of the firm favourites of mine. So that was that. Now we're going to go up a slight notch here and go a little bit more hip-hoppy, I suppose. And this time with a record from a Tommy Boy Records offshoot called Hack Attack Records. Now, this is called Think Tank Hack 1. And Sasha used to play this back in the day. Quite a few DJs played it back in the day. But this record, it was just one of those kind of hip house records that just samples James Brown, basically. It's just a sample of Superbad by James Brown. And it's just absolutely awesome. I used to mix this with the Young MC Know-How. When the breakbeat comes at the end, the little electro beat, I used to mix this with that and do a scratch. I used to love mixing this record, basically. It's just a great little breakbeat-y
What you
anthem.
gonna play now? What you gonna play now?
So again, it's just one of those records. It's of a selection of a variety of records from that year. You know, it's not house, it's not hip hop. What is it? You know, it's just a combination of everything. Everything was all up in the air, I suppose, during that period. People were trying all sorts of stuff, which is really creative. You know, which is great. But this record, this is where the breakbeat comes, and this is where I'd mix Young MC Know-How into with the guitar. And it perfectly worked. It was just perfect. So that's Think Tank and Hack 1. And the weirdest thing about this record is that this was made in 1990, right? So on the record it's called Hack 1, the Internet Worm Mix. Now, for somebody to call a record the Internet Worm Mix right back in 1990 when the internet was probably a few months old, it's quite forward thinking, I would say. The flip side is a little sample, is more of a hip hop breakbeat thing where it samples the Rock Creek Park guitar of the Blackbirds. Funk classic.
1, 2, 3, 4.
If you'll all gather close around the phonograph and listen carefully, I'll tell you how we're going to have a whole lot of fun.
So yeah, that was just a little bit more of a slower tempo thing with the Blackbird sample in there. So that was Think Tank and Hack 1. And we're really going to go up a few notches now. And now this one, this is my all-time favourite record from that year. There is no disputing it. It is the king of kings for me. It is a clear vinyl pressing, by the way. You can see that on the video, and you can't see it on the audio version, obviously. But still, this record came out in that year, and I had a DJ Ron and Rebel MC mixtape, right, from Perception, some ravey thing called Perception. And it was the first time I'd heard this on there. I was only like 14 or 15 or whatever. And when it came out, I was like, oh my God, what is that record? I need that record. And it took me about 3 years to get it. 3 years to get it, in fact, because I never knew what it was, but I had it on this tape and I played it to death. And then when I started working in a record shop in late 1993, Network Records reissued loads of their classic records. And this came out, obviously, 3 years prior to that. And the label obviously reissued this, and it came out on clear vinyl. And I was gobsmacked when I found it, and I couldn't believe it. You know, I got the name of it. I was like, yes, I finally found that record. And it's always been with me ever since. And it's one of them records that is from that bleep scene. It's from that bleep scene of that era, you know, like Sheffield, Warp, LFO, 4 Hero, Mr. Kirk, that kind of stuff. and it's called Indulge, and it's by Neil Howard, who was a guy from Chicago or Detroit, I think Chicago. And he released one record. He released probably 2 records, if that, 2 or 3 records, and then he disappeared. He never made anything else again, but he made this, which is just a timeless piece of bleep techno. Amazing record. It's got all the sounds, it's got the choir pads, it's got the pianos, it's got the tough beats, it's got everything you need. And as I say, it took me 3 years to find the name of it, but I found it because perseverance is the key. And these were the days before the internet, so you know, when you were crate digging, you would go around record shops with a tape. Can you put this tape on, mate? And at this point, can you tell me what this track is? And you know, that's how you did your crate digging in them days. And an interesting thing about this record was, back in 1995, I was working for Progress, the nightclub in Derby. And Robert Owens came over from America to DJ, and he was a legend by then anyway, because he'd had his club hit, I Want to Be Your Friend and all that stuff, I'll Be Your Friend. And he came over and DJ'd for us, and we're on the dance floor, and all of a sudden he played this record, and I was just like, oh, yes, you know, it was amazing to hear that on the dance floor in a club full of 1,000 people. Most of them, maybe, you know, a lot of people wouldn't have known what it was, but it was an absolute proper hands in the air moment for me. It's just when it drops here with the piano, with the riff and the orchestra, the choir pads. It's just proper bleep techno at its best. I'll shut up now. Goes on and it just goes on, it just goes on, it just keeps going and keeps going, and it just never lets off, but it never gets tiring, it never gets boring. It's just a great piece of music. It's just got the lush pads and the little blippy sounds. It's just perfect. And also the fact that it's, you know, really rough in production, which also adds to the character and the charm of it, you know. So that was Indulge by Neil Howard on Network Records, and yeah, my all-time favourite. So we've got one more to do in this episode. Now, this record and this band are probably one of the most important bands to me in music. They inspired me more than any band, I suppose, to be into electronic music, and that is the Pet Shop Boys. And in 1990, they had a new album come out called Behaviour, and again, my favourite album. And they had a single, the 2 singles that year, So Hard and Being Boring. And the Being Boring single came out as a remix 12. And on one side, it's Marshall Jefferson's remix of the single Being Boring. But on the flip side was a track called We All Feel Better in the Dark, and it was a Brothers in Rhythm remix on the remix 12-inch. And it's like an ambient stroke dance track, and it's just a brilliant little record. And I just thought, I've got to get it in there because the Pet Shop Boys are my all-time favourite band. I'll get it in there, and we'll see what you think to it. It's a really lush thing, and obviously Brothers in Rhythm is, you know, Dave Seaman, who was also a famous house DJ for Renaissance and clubs like that during the 90s, still going today. And this is it. It was like an ambient, chill out
The
sort of
secrets
after hours track.
of sexual attraction.
These are the days when record companies could afford to throw loads of money at remixers. You know, you'd get 3 or 4 mixers of top DJs and producers of the time putting a mix together of a famous pop group or rock band or whatever. And the Pet Shop Boys were always spearheading in that. You know, they always had the latest cutting edge producers and DJs doing their remixes. They've always been like that. They've always been on the cusp of, you know, on the edge of cool. Gets a bit jazzy here. The guitarist there is a guy called JJ Bell, who's no longer with us, but he was one of the main guitarists on the Pet Shop Boys tour and their album during that period. Great guitarist. So that's it for the end of this episode. That's the Pet Shop Boys and We All Feel Better in the Dark, the Brothers in Rhythm remix. That's it for this year. Hopefully you've enjoyed that and you've taken something from that and heard some old tracks. Head over to the next one next week, which will be 1991, where we really step it up a gear or two. So thank you very much for watching and goodbye.